it's Josh with the Financial Advisor Car Guy. Today we're going to discuss how you can drive an exotic for free. Yes, you did hear me right. Now, before I dive into how, I want to lay out a few disclaimers. This doesn't work for everybody. It definitely isn't me giving you advice to do this, so please do this at your own risk. You may or may not have success with it, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means, but at the same time, please do not confuse yourself into thinking that this will work every time and with every car. Okay, so now that I've kind of laid that out there for you, let's dive in. So you might see people driving down the road in a Ferrari or in a Lamborghini or in some high-end Mercedes or BMW and instantly assume they've got money. That's not necessarily the case, right? Just about anybody can look like they have money. In fact, I'd argue it's more often the other way, right? People that have money value that, and they're smart with their dollars. They're willing to invest in the stock market or in real estate or in other types of tangible investments, and not necessarily in their cars. So they might drive, something ordinary, which they might lease. Now, leasing isn't always a bad thing. It really depends on the circumstance. But at the same time, leasing is more or less throwing money away. Now, leasing a vehicle for a business expense might be the one exception to the rule, because every 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, depending on the lease, you get a new vehicle. So if a company gives you, say, a $300 automobile allowance, unless there's something really cool that you want for that dollar amount, maybe it does make sense to lease if they're going to make that payment for you. But again, remember, you're not building equity and you're not owning that vehicle. At the end of that lease, you give it back. And so you've thrown that money away. Now, what if I told you that instead of making a lease payment, you could make a purchase payment towards any vehicle of your choosing within your budget? So if you think of a brand new Ferrari or a Lamborghini, a lease on one of those cars is probably $2,000 a month, maybe more. And all you're doing is you're paying the depreciation of the vehicle. So for example, if the car is a $200,000 car, and in 3 years, it's going to be worth $120,000. They basically, so it's kind of generic, simple math, they basically take that $80,000 of depreciation, right, and divide it out by how long your lease is. So $80,000 over 36 months, right? Again, that's simple math. It's about $2,200 a month, and that'd be your lease payment. Now, when the lease is up, if the car is worth less than that $120,000, that's fine. You can walk away, you just give the car back, or you buy it if you choose to, or whatever you choose to do at that point. But if the car didn't depreciate like you thought, or like the dealership thought when you signed that lease agreement, if the car is worth $150,000, they're going to buy it back from you, right? Or you have equity. So you can take that equity and roll it into a purchase. You can take that equity and do what you choose with it, or you can sell the car privately and just buy yourself out of the lease. So I'm not going to dive into what that looks like. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about leases. The idea here is, how do you drive an exotic or a high-end car for free? So I'll transition. Basically what you do is you find a car that's not new. You find a car that's depreciated, okay? Now I'm going to use my Ford Raptor as a great example, because we've talked about this in prior episodes. The depreciation on these trucks has pretty well bottomed out. So I can find a 2011, 12, 13, 14, depending on the mileage, they're going to be somewhere between, I'd say, $26,000 and $35,000, right? That's a fair size range, but you can get in at $26,000 or $27,000 to a truck that might be identical to one that someone's trying to get $33,000, $34,000 for. So the idea here is to find the best deal on a truck or car that's already depreciated to the point where it's sort of bottomed out. Now, let's say I paid $30,000 for my truck. Now, it's still worth $30,000 2 years later. And I've put 11 or 12,000 miles on it in the time I've owned it, and I could still probably sell it for about what I'm into it. I've done routine maintenance. I've done real few upgrades here and there, which you've also seen in other videos. But at the same time, it hasn't depreciated further. So the only money that I'm out is any interest that I've paid on the loan. Well, I have since paid off the truck, so there's no debt, there's no loan. If I sold it today, I can hand that person the title, they're going to hand me a check, and we're done. So that's a pretty great feeling. I'm not paying interest, I'm not going to lose that money. But at the same time, if I sell the truck for $26,000 or $27,000 or $28,000, whatever I paid less whatever I sell it for is how much it costs for me to drive it over a couple of years. So if you think about cars that are on their way back out of the depreciation curve, again, Ferraris and Lamborghinis are a great example of this. There's a few, the Audi R8, the BMW i8, the Nissan GTR. There's a few other examples out there where if you find an example that's maybe 10 years old, it's definitely at the bottom of its depreciation curve and will start heading the other direction. So I'm gonna pick on, GTR is a good example here. When they were new, MSRP was $75,000, $80,000, depending on options and how you spec the car out. It is very, very difficult today to find that car under $50,000. Now, if you find one under $50,000 and you can afford it, it's a very safe bet. You can buy it for that 48 or 49 or 50,000 bucks, drive it modestly. I wouldn't encourage you to daily drive the thing and put 1,000,000 miles on it. But if you conceptually can buy a good example for a really good price, you could probably drive that thing for a year and 5,000 miles, or a year or two and 8 or 10,000 miles, and sell it for what you paid for it, if not more. So that's kind of the idea, is looking for the right buy and looking for the timing. I kind of mentioned the geographic landscape varies. In Central Oregon here, all-wheel drive cars demand a premium. So if I have a rear-wheel drive sports car, I am not going to be able to sell it in January. So with that in mind, in January, that's when I should be looking to buy a rear-wheel drive car, because someone who's got that car for sale knows they're not going to be able to sell it, and it's going to sit on the market. And if they're trying to sell it that time of the year, they likely need it gone. So if someone's listing, I don't know, a good example, let's say a Ferrari that's rear-wheel drive, maybe MSRP is $250,000, it's depreciated to $150,000, they're trying to sell it for that. Someone with cash is going to probably be able to get that car for $140,000 or $130,000, depending on the need, and depending on other external factors. But again, the better deal, the better the quantity of money made when you go to sell that vehicle. So if I can buy a car that's worth $150,000 for $130,000, especially in the winter, I can drive it come spring, maybe even into the summer, put a couple thousand miles on it, and then maybe I list it for that $150,000, knowing that that's what it's worth. You also want to know where to sell it, right? If I've got an all-wheel drive car, I want it listed here in Central Oregon, or I want it somewhere accessible to people who might need that all-wheel drive capability. If I've got a rear-wheel drive car and I'm in the middle of winter, I'm not going to try to sell it locally, because I know the reason I'm selling it, or the reason that someone wouldn't buy it, is because it's not going to do well in ice or snow. But if I sold it to a big city, let's say Seattle or San Francisco or even Portland, if we're staying within the state, those folks can drive rear-wheel drive cars year-round. Maybe a couple days a year they have to leave it in the garage, but for the most part, they can drive them year-round. And so you kind of have to know your audience and market it in such a way that it is an accessible thing for those folks that might be looking for that car. You also want to make sure that, again, this doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but you want to make sure that you can afford the payment. So if I buy a $50,000 car and it's over 60 months, depending on the interest rate, that's an $800 or $900 or $1,000 a month payment that, hopefully you get back when you sell that vehicle. Now, one way to look at this is a glorified savings account. Now, again, do not do this if you don't already have a savings account, or if you are, planning to just drive the crap out of this car. This isn't a savings vehicle for you. But if it's a collector's car that's going to appreciate, you might drive it on the weekends or in fair weather only, you're going to keep the miles down, you're getting a killer deal on it. Using that, GTR as our example, if my payment on that thing is $1,000 a month, over the life of the loan, I might pay, $5,000, $6,000 in interest. I don't know if that's great math, but again, over a 60-month or a 72-month loan, I can do that. And anywhere along the track of paying that truck or car off, it's not losing value. So it's like putting that $1,000 into the car payment is like putting $1,000 into the bank. And so I'm going to try to use round numbers just for the simplicity of it. If I make 60 payments of $1,000, that's a $60,000 car. Now if I buy the car for, again, $52,000, $53,000, if I can sell it for $52,000 or $53,000 5 years later, I'm only losing the interest. So whatever the interest payment each month was is what it's costing me to drive that vehicle. The rest of that money comes back to me. So I can't stress to you enough how much this can or cannot work. This will not work with your run-of-the-mill Ford F-150 pickup. They depreciate too rapidly. There's no floor on depreciation. The older they get, the higher the mileage, the more they lose value. Ford Raptors, a little different. You can drive them, you can enjoy them, you can modify them, and eventually they will hit the bottom of the depreciation curve and plateau, okay? I cannot stress that enough. They will not continue to lose value unless they are wrecked. They are destroyed and just rallied and falling apart, and at that point it becomes more of a supply and demand issue. If you've got someone down the street who's selling the same truck for $1,000 more, but it's in far better condition, you may not sell your truck, right? Someone's going to go down the street and happily pay a little bit more for something that's been maintained, is in better running condition, maybe looks better, no dings and dents and those kind of things. So run-of-the-mill vehicles do not work. Do not try to make a big car payment on something that is just going to continue to depreciate. Right? That is the trick here. You want to make sure you find a car that is desirable, that is already at or very close to its bottom of the depreciation curve, and that will start turning around. So, mid 2000s to 2015s, right? 05 to 15, a lot of those cars, I mean, again, high-end exotics are a great example of this. You can get a Ferrari, 458, for not a whole bunch more than 125, 130, 140,000, again, depending on how it's spec'd. And you could drive that thing for quite some time, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 miles, as long as you're doing maintenance, keeping receipts, and, again, as long as you get a very desirable option pack on those cars, they're going to hold their value. And in all likelihood, you can sell it for what you paid, potentially even more in a couple of years. So the other thing to consider is that this is not a end-all be-all for a car that you're going to keep forever. You've kind of got to go into this with a short-term game in mind. You want to make sure that the car is not going to, require tons of maintenance and big services and all those things. You want to buy a car that's well-maintained already, buy it, sit on it, enjoy it, drive it. And anywhere from 6 months to a year to 2 or 3, you probably want to move on. So that's the other trick. The longer you keep the car, the harder it is to get every dollar back out, because eventually it will require maintenance. You will have to start putting, new tires on it, new suspension work, and all those other big major wear and tears. And again, depending on the car, some exotics, you have to pull the entire engine out to do certain maintenance. It can cost thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to do some of that routine maintenance that just comes with age. So you want to do your homework. But again, if you're willing to go into this with a kind of a shorter term mindset, and if you fall in love with the car, that's a totally different story. You may just, forget the whole program and just deal with it, buy it, love it, enjoy it, pay it off, and own it forever. That's fine. But at the same time, if you want to buy an exotic for nothing, right? Find the right car, drive it the right amount of time, enjoy it the right amount of ways, do your maintenance, keep receipts, keep it clean, detail, all those things that just helps maintain value. And then when you get ready to sell it, hopefully, if you've done everything correctly, you can sell it for more than what you paid for it. So now you guys are probably asking, Josh, why aren't you driving a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or one of those cars? Well, I'll tell you, I've not gone that direction yet. I'm working on my Raptor, okay? I love this truck. I don't know that I'll ever sell it. And those of you that know me are probably laughing, because cars do not stay in my house. They come, they go, I enjoy them, and then they're gone. But this truck, I really do plan on keeping. And it may not be my daily driver forever. I might do something different, but I use it to pull a camp trailer, and I love the heck out of it. And so it's going to stick around. The first gen Raptors are my favorite. I'm not going to get a second gen. I will very unlikely get a third gen when they become more affordable. This thing is probably here to stay. I also have my 68 Mustang convertible, which is appreciating as I store it here in the garage. It's directly behind you here, and it's going up in value almost every day. So, would I sell it for in the future? If I ever to sell it, it's going to be much higher then than it is today, which is higher today than it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It appreciates as time allows. So, again, pick wisely when you're shopping and you won't lose money. An opposite example of that is my wife's 5 Series. We have a BMW 535, twin turbo, very fast, very fun car, fully loaded, nearly every option. I think the only things it doesn't have is heated seats in the back and the rear DVD screens in the headrests. Beyond that, I don't think it's missing an option. It's got everything. And beautiful car, but it's not the M series, right? So the M5s have kind of plateaued and are going back the other way. Her 535, although it's just as nice a car in a lot of regard, it has depreciated. And we felt like we got a pretty good deal on it 5-ish years ago, and I'd be lucky. I've saved receipts for maintenance and things like that, but I'd be lucky to get 1/3 of what we put into that car back. So, again, that's kind of the opposite. That's the daily driver routine. That's your run-of-the-mill, if you will, car. It's not something that's ever going to appreciate. It may plateau or it may stop depreciating, and that's fine, but it fell so hard so fast that, it's one that we've just put miles on and continued to drive and enjoy. And when we do replace it, I do want to kind of practice these principles and do something a little different. And, I'd love to see my wife driving an M5, but I don't know, again, it's $1,000 payment or more. And it just depends. I really enjoy my other cars. I really enjoy, kind of having options. And I want to be able to buy that project and build that project and work on that project. So kind of a long-winded answer for, again, that potential question of, Josh, why aren't you driving a Lambo or a Ferrari? I should tell you, I'm working on it. I don't know if and when it'll happen, but it is something that I keep in the back of my mind. These strategies are, ever evolving. And if I want a brand new Audi R8, today's not the day to go buy one. I want to wait about 5 years and buy one that's 4 to 5 years old. And then, again, enjoy it and then potentially flip it after a year or so. Right now, the 08, 09 R8s are starting to climb. There was a time where you could find those things for under $50,000. Not often, but occasionally. And right now, if you look on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, Auto Tempest, Car Guru, any of those places, you're lucky to find one under $60,000, and they have a lot of miles on them. And they might have, 30, 40, 50,000 miles or more. Now that car can run 100,000 very, very easily. It's super reliable, they're fun, they're fast, they're all-wheel drive. If you get the V10, you've got a lot of power. They're just great cars, and I definitely want to have one in my garage at some point. But with them starting to appreciate the other way, a 2008 isn't any cheaper than a 10 or 11. And, if that's the case, I refer back to my Raptor. Mine's a 2011, it's the same price as a 14. They've kind of all been lumped together in a generation, if you will. And people don't care about the year so much as they care about the options and the mileage. So, again, if I am shopping for one, I'm gonna look for mileage over year. The 2009 is gonna be the same to me as an 11. If there's less miles, I'm gonna go with the 9. So again, I wanna pay attention to that, and for resale, same thing. Mileage is probably gonna trump year unless there was a facelift or unless the body style changes a bunch. And so, yeah, there's a lot to consider. Putting this into practice isn't easy. Again, you really have to know your monthly budget, and I would say start with that. We talked about budgeting your build in a prior episode, but here, this isn't the same. This one, you wanna buy a car that, maybe you modify the wheels and the tires and the suspension, maybe you do a little bit here and there, but for the most part, you're buying a car that's pretty well done, pretty well desirable, something that's going to appreciate, right? Someone else has already eaten the depreciation. Let somebody else buy that $200,000 car. You buy it for half that, enjoy it, and then sell it for what you paid or more, and you have won. So if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, I would love to hear them. Shoot me an email, comment down below. Please like, subscribe, spread the word. Please help my channel grow. I would love to see more subscribers. I would love to see more interaction down in the comments. And at some point moving forward, I do want to do a couple of giveaways. Haven't decided exactly what those are going to be, but I'm excited. And so let's see where we can go with this. Thanks again, and like always, may every investment you make be a good one.